Okay, for this video lecture, so we will be discussing about our accounting worksheet. Okay, so first we will define what this term is all about. Okay, when we say accounting worksheet, this is a tool that is used to help the bookkeepers and our accountants to complete the accounting cycle and also to prepare the year-end reports like the unadjusted trial balances, adjusting journal entries, our adjusted trial balance, and ultimately our financial statements. But for our worksheet, you can prepare from the data, okay, our income statement and balance sheet, respectively. So for the format, the accounting worksheet, normally this is a spreadsheet, okay, or this is also known as the 10-column worksheet. Okay, you can work or prepare this using our Excel. So this will track each step of the accounting cycle. So our spreadsheet typically has 10 columns, okay, or 5 sets of columns. But of course, since we have the columns for debits and credits, okay, for each trial balances up to the income statement and balance sheets, so all in all, it will comprise of 10 columns. So here, we will be starting with the unadjusted trial balance accounts. So, and as mentioned earlier, okay, so the final output will be the financial statements, or in this case, we can prepare our income statement and balance sheet. In other words, an accounting worksheet is a spreadsheet that shows all the major steps in our accounting cycle side by side. So each of these steps lists, as mentioned earlier, our debits and credits, okay, with its corresponding totals that is found at the bottom, okay, of the spreadsheet. So just like the trial balance, our worksheet also has the heading. So this is very important because heading serves as an identifier of what is the report is all about. Okay, so your header is just like your name. Okay, so that the readers or users will know, okay, what type of information they are looking into. Okay, so of course for our heading, so it will consist of the company name, the title of the report. So in this case, we will write it in the second line. Okay, so we will write the word worksheet. Okay, so that is the title of our report. And lastly, of course, for the third line is our time period, where or when this worksheet was prepared and covered. Okay, so normally this is the format. So as we go along, we will have the example. Okay, so we will proceed with the columns in the accounting worksheet. So as mentioned earlier, we will be starting with the unadjusted trial balance. Okay, so the unadjusted trial balance, this is the listing of the accounts that are going to appear in our financial statements. So this is before the adjusting entries. Okay, that's why it's called as unadjusted trial balance. So this is normally the third step in our accounting cycle. So after all the journal entries were posted in the ledger or in your T accounts and its balances were already identified, then we can now prepare our unadjusted trial balance. So normally the accounts and its balances are coming from our ledgers or T accounts. That's where we get the details that we will input into our worksheet under the unadjusted trial balance. So this is the first column, okay, in our accounting worksheet, and this will include all the components that are part of the unadjusted trial balance. So such as our revenue, expense, asset, liabilities, okay, all the accounts, okay, that the entity are using to record their business transactions. So the total of the debit columns for this, please take note, it should be equal also to the total of our credit column. Okay, so if not, meaning there has been an error in the preceding accounting cycle or in the accounting records or journal entries or the balances coming from the ledger. So that's the error may be coming from, because in this steps in our worksheet, in our unadjusted trial balance, we just summarize, okay, in a report form the transactions that were recorded and their balances was computed. Okay, for the format of our unadjusted trial balance, so this will have a 3-column column. The first column is for the account titles or account names. The second column will be for the debit accounts. This is where the amount of the debit accounts will be entered. And the third column will be for the credits. So, of course, our you all know, okay, or we all know that the debit balances will be listed in the left column facing you, and our credit balances will be listed on the right side. Okay, that's our accounting equation. So, accounts are usually listed in order. Okay, so how do we list the account titles in the worksheet? So, normally, this is based on the account number if the entity is utilizing the account number, or depending on how they present, okay, the accounts. So most chart of accounts, normally they are numbered, okay, in balance sheet order. So the unadjusted trial balance will also reflect those account numbers, or depending on what the entity is using, okay, in the preparation of their worksheet. So basically, in the Philippines, we are using a format where assets will be listed first, followed by the liability accounts, and lastly will be the equity, as well as our income and expense accounts. So that's how we list or present our account titles. Okay, so both the debit and credit columns, this will be calculated at the bottom. So again, please make sure that the total debit should be equal to the total credits. Okay, if they aren't equal again, so you have to go back to the preceding accounting cycle step, okay, to determine where did the error occurred. Okay, so as with all financial reports, trial balances are always prepared again with a heading. So the same format for the heading. So the first line will be for the name of the entity or the business. Second line will be the name of the report. The third will be for the period covered, okay, of the report. So how do we prepare our unadjusted trial balance? So here, posting our accounts to the unadjusted trial balance is very simple. So of course, each one of the account balances, again, as mentioned earlier, those account titles and balances coming from our ledger accounts will be transferred to our unadjusted trial balance. So all accounts with debit balances, again, they will be listed on the left side, and all the credits will also be listed on the right side column. So we have here an example of our worksheet. Okay, so here, just like what we have mentioned, we have the heading. Okay, so this is for ABC Consultancy. So this is our worksheet. Okay, this is the name of the report. So the period covered is for the year ended December 31, 2020. So we have here our three columns, our account titles, okay, in the first column. So these are listed according to the basis of the listing is we will write first the asset accounts, followed by our liability accounts, then our equity, then our income or revenue, and lastly will be our expense accounts. Okay, so here in the unadjusted trial balances, okay, all the debit accounts will be listed on the left side, and for the credit accounts, they will also be listed on the right side. Okay, so all the assets are debit. Okay, our liability and equity accounts are credit. Okay, so we also have our withdrawals in the debit side. Revenues are credit, and all our expenses are on the debit side. So if you could notice in our totals, we have the same total for our debit and credit. Okay, and also please take note of this double line at the bottom of our totals. This is called as the double rule. Okay, so this is also important to note, okay, for our totals in every report that we make in the financial reports. Okay, so this is our unadjusted trial balance. So for the 10 columns, this is the first two columns, the unadjusted trial balance. Okay, so that's how simple our worksheet or unadjusted trial balance is to make. Okay, so again, account titles and amounts are taken from our ledger accounts or T accounts. Okay, so what is the next part of the worksheet? Okay, so the next third and fourth column will be for our adjusting entries. So in your previous session, you have included there the topic about adjusting of the accounts. So this is actually the same as this one. So that's why, if you could notice in my illustration, I just gave you the adjusting entries already. So assuming that you have the idea of how to make this adjusting entries. Okay, so we have here examples. I have given you 3 examples of adjusting entries that we will use, okay, in the worksheet. So for the first adjusting entry, so this pertains to our depreciation. So we will debit depreciation expense, credit to accumulated depreciation. The second adjusting entry is for our earned revenues. Okay, so in this case, at the end of the period, the entity have already earned, okay, this revenue. So we will transfer this amount of 5,000 from the liability account to the revenues account, because this is now recognized, or this can be recognized now by the entity as their revenues already, because they already earned, okay, this through the rendering of their services. And lastly is for our salaries. Okay, so normally this happens when, for example, the payment of the salary falls on the 15th or 30th of the month, and for example, the ending of our accounting cycle falls in between, or after the or before the salaries will be paid. But in this case, the employees have already earned, okay, their salaries for a period of number of days. So we will, or the entity should recognize it, okay, as an expense and payable. Okay, so this is just a simple adjusting entry. Okay, so what we're going to do is to enter this amount, okay, into the respective accounts and columns for the debit and credit in the adjusting entries. Okay, again, this is under the worksheet. This is our third and fourth columns. Okay, so all you have to do is to transfer it, okay, for our accumulated depreciation, so that's credit. So we will just follow where this account titles was listed in the account title column. Okay, so our debit is under depreciation expense. Okay, second is our salaries expense and salaries payable, and lastly is our unearned revenues and the recognized revenues. Okay, so under our adjusting entries columns, please take note also that our totals should be equal, meaning our debit should also equal to our credit side. Okay, so this is for our adjusting entries. Okay, so we go now to the next columns, fifth and sixth columns. So this is for our adjusted trial balance. So our adjusted trial balance, this is simply the combination of the unadjusted trial balance and the adjusting entries. So meaning, the unadjusted trial balance, if there are any entries that were posted in the adjusting entries, so we will either add or deduct depending on where the amount was posted. Okay, so on our adjusted trial balance, this is the listing of all the company accounts that will appear in our financial statements, which includes now the adjusting journal entries. So preparing our adjusted trial balance this is considered to be our fifth step in the accounting cycle. So actually, this is the last step before our financial statements can be produced, meaning whatever the amounts of whatever the balances of the accounts, okay, will be used in the preparation of our financial statements. This will be taken from our adjusted trial balance. Okay, what is our format? Our adjusted trial balance is exactly just like our unadjusted trial balance. Okay, so it will also reflect or display the account titles, debit and credit columns. Okay, and then like the unadjusted trial balance also, they are usually, or the same listing will be followed. Okay, both debit and credit columns of our adjusted trial balance should also be equal. Okay, so as with all financial reports, so again it will have a heading, but again in this case, in my illustration, or in the illustration that I gave you, I just used the heading for our worksheet. Okay, so for the preparation, okay, so there are two main ways to prepare the adjusted trial balance. Okay, so you could post accounts to the adjusted trial balance using the same method used as mentioned earlier, just like our unadjusted trial balance. Okay, so this can be taken, or the balances are taken from the T accounts. But in this case, again, what we're going to do is just to add or deduct, okay, the balance of the account from the unadjusted trial balance and the adjusting entries. That will be our adjusted trial balance. Okay, so this is our example. Okay, so if you could notice, we have here the columns. We showed here the columns for our unadjusted trial balance and adjusting entries. And then the result of that, adding or depending on the case, again, so we will either add or deduct the adjusting entries, okay, to get our adjusted trial balance. So in this illustration, you can see the cash account. So we have no adjusting entries for it. So all you have to do is to forward its balance from the unadjusted trial balance to adjusted trial balance. So we have the same amount of 100,000. The same thing until our property, plant, and equipment. Now, for our accumulated depreciation, if you could see in our unadjusted trial balance, we have no entry for that. But in our adjusting entries, we have a credit of 75,000. So in our adjusted trial balance, we will reflect the adjusted or adjusting entry of 75,000 in the credit side. So all you have to do is to follow, okay, where does this amount was posted. Okay, so our accounts payable have no adjusting entry, so we will forward the 50,000 to our adjusted trial balance. Okay, for our unearned revenues, so if you could see in our unadjusted trial balance, we have 25,000 credit, while in our adjusting entries, we have debit of 5,000. So please take note in the preparation of our adjusted trial balance. If the account in the unadjusted trial balance is debit and the adjusting entry is debit, we will add this amount, okay, to compute for our adjusted balance. Okay, next, if our account in the unadjusted trial balance has a debit amount or debit balance and our adjusting entries is on the credit side, then we will deduct that. Okay, we will deduct the amount of adjusting entries, okay, to get to your adjusted trial balance. Meaning, if they have the same side with the unadjusted trial balance and adjusting entries, we will add these amounts. If their amount is different, meaning debit from the unadjusted and credit to adjusting entries, we will deduct, okay, these amounts to get your adjusted balances. And for example, if the account has a credit balance in the unadjusted and during the adjusting entry it also has a credit balance, then we will add. If again the account has a credit balance in the unadjusted and debit on the adjusting entries, we will deduct, okay, this amount to get our adjusted trial balance. Okay, so that's how we prepare adjusted amounts. Okay, so going back with our unearned revenues, so our unadjusted trial balance, we have 25,000 credit, and in our adjusting entry we have 5,000 debit. So since they have the opposite or different sides, credit and debit, so we will deduct these amounts. So that's why in our adjusted trial balance, it will show a credit of 20,000. So how to know where to place the difference? So we will follow, just like your T account, we will follow the side on which it has a greater amount or balance. So since the credit has a greater balance than the debit, so it is placed under the credit side. Okay, so unearned revenues from 25,000, it was deducted for 5,000. So our adjusted balance is now 20,000 credit. Okay, next, for our salaries payable, so we don't have the entries for that under the unadjusted trial balance, but we have it in our adjusting entries. So just follow, okay, its placement on the credit side for our adjusted trial balance. So the same thing will also be done with the rest of the accounts and their balances. Okay, so that's how we make our adjusted trial balance. So again, please take note that your debit and credit side should always be equal as well. Okay, so the last columns is for our financial statements. So basically, we have our income statement and balance sheet. So financial statements, these are reports prepared by the management. Okay, so this represent the financial performance and position in a point of time. So normally, what the entity is preparing is a general purpose financial statements. When we say general purpose financial statements, meaning this can be used by anyone, okay, with different objectives of using the FS. Okay, so this will include our balance sheet, income statement. Okay, but in our worksheet, we can only prepare these two, income statement and balance sheet. The rest will be discussed in the next learning material and video lecture. Okay. So, financial statements, these are the source of our financial information. So, we all know that. Okay. For the income statement, so this is the columns will include the values related to our revenues and expense account. So, here, if the total revenues is more than our expenses, the difference will be our net income. So, the opposite will hold true, meaning if the revenues is less than our expenses, then the result will be net loss. Okay, so what about for our balance sheet? Okay, so this is the last column in our accounting worksheet. So it will include all the assets, liabilities, and equity accounts. So in this case, our total debit should always be equal also to its credit totals. That's why it's called balance sheet. Okay, so this will summarize, or in the owner's equity account, it will summarize all the owner investment as well as its withdrawal, or we can also show the withdrawal account, okay, of the entity. So this is our income statement and balance sheet. So again, the balances that we will forward in our income statement and balance sheet will be coming from our adjusted trial balance. For our income statement, again, this is for our revenues and expense. So that's why what we forward here is our revenues and expense accounts. So if you could notice here, we have a difference of 260. So meaning, this is written in the debit side, okay, but this pertains to our profit. In this case, our revenue is more than our expense. That's why the difference is placed in the debit side to make our bottom line equal. Okay, so this is again our profit. For example, if our revenue is less than our expenses, or meaning there is more expense than our revenues, the difference will be reflected in the credit side. So in the credit side, meaning that pertains to a loss, because we have to add a number so that it will equal to the debit side. Okay, so that's the premise of the reason why this difference is placed in this side. Okay, please take note of that. So again, if that is placed on the debit side, it pertains to our profit, because in this case, expenses is less than our revenue. So we have a profit. So in the opposite, if the profit or the revenue is less than the expenses, so the difference will be placed on the credit side, so that will pertain to our loss. Okay? So, again, the total should be equal here. That's for our income statement. For the last columns for our balance sheet, actually, whatever accounts and balances that were not forwarded in the income statement will belong to the balance sheet. Okay? But of course, again, for the balance sheet, what we will forward here are our assets, liabilities, and equity accounts. So if you could notice there. Okay? And make sure also that your balances, okay, for debit and credit is also equal. Okay? So that's for our accounting worksheet. Okay, so this is wait, I think, okay, I don't know if it's visible. Okay, so this is our complete worksheet. Okay, so we have the account titles, unadjusted trial balance, adjusting entries, adjusted trial balance, income statement, and lastly is our balance sheet. So this is our 10-column worksheet. Okay, so that ends our discussion about accounting worksheet.